Big shout, and Paul Rifle puts the finger up. So de Kock is gone.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Radio Cricket for the week beginning Monday 15th October 2012. I'm Nishant Joshi and I'm joined by the man who enjoyed a brief but controversial stint as head coach of the Syrian national team before his avant-garde tactics sparked nationwide protests, precipitating in a year-long civil war which is yet to be resolved. His notorious tactics were criticised as being heavy-handed and unnecessarily aggressive by none other than President Assad himself, and his reign was described by Richie Benaud as the darkest period in the game's history. His tactics included forcing his charges to bowl beamers at tail-enders, a tactic widely vilified but later adopted by cricketers around the world, most notably Australia's Brett Lee. Thankfully, his reign of terror was brought to an end in a bloody coup in 2011, after being photographed in a Damascus hotel room with the sister of the Syrian national captain, an incident he described as totally worth it. Live from Bono, it is James Marsh.
Yes, indeed, Nishant. It was well worth having my testicles hot-wired to that car battery for the next 6 months. How I miss her. Anyway, but yes, let's move on, shall we? How have you been this week?
I just did a week on the gynecology ward, which means that I was staring at cunts for a week. Now I know what the ECB media manager feels like.
Oh, Nishant. Perhaps that's too good for them, that description. Anyway, alright, well, speaking of staring at vacuous entities, have you seen any of the Champions League T20, which has recently got underway?
Well, actually, I have been watching it, and the Indian teams have been struggling so far, haven't they? In what they deem to be alien conditions of filling the league with 50% of your own team and then still seeing them lose.
It's terrible because it's coincided with Ravi Shastri's return to commentary, and, you know, it's been absolutely devastating. Well, almost cruel, almost as cruel as a Syrian torture chamber to make him have to watch these Indian sides struggling, Nishant. So, you know, what do you think has been the problem for the IPL teams competing?
Well, I think the problems facing the IPL sides are the perennial ones which seem to face Indian sides playing abroad, especially in conditions like South Africa, England, Australia, and even New Zealand from time to time. But in particular, you see the likes of Murali Vijay look a complete fish out of water, struggling against Mitchell Starc the other day, getting bowled by a fairly innocuous but decent in-swinging full delivery, bowling him straight through the gate. Gautam Gambhir looks in terrible nick these days. He scored just 5 runs in 2 innings, and both have been out to leading edges, which is very uncharacteristic, but really could concern Indian fans that Gambhir is in terminal decline now, considering his lack of form. He hasn't scored a test century in nearly 2 years now as well, which is a massive concern, obviously. If you look at even the bowlers, Lakshmipathy Balaji, playing for Kolkata Knight Riders, has gone for 99 runs in 8 overs in the tournament so far, and he was India's leading wicket taker at the World T20 as well. So perhaps India's reserves are a bit thin on the ground as well.
Well, if I could just don my Shastri moustache for a minute, Nishant, I know how you like me to, and say, but surely, I mean, Suresh Raina's performance was a bit of a bright spot. Of course, he came into this tournament, everyone's saying he was going to have problems against the short ball again as usual, but particularly on these sort of bouncy South African wickets. But he actually performed quite well against Sydney, against an attack of Cummins and Stark the other day.
Well, I can't really say that Suresh Raina really managed to convince me on a Johannesburg pitch which was flatter than a Russian gymnast's chest. I do think that his 68 metres top edge 6 over mid-wicket wasn't particularly convincing, although it did seem to have Indian fans orgasming at the mere thought of an Indian hooking the ball for 6 off a fast bowler. I would like to reserve judgment a bit more until Raina is finally able to replicate his IPL form on the test stage.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens with dear old Suresh, but looking at sort of domestic players, and this young lad de Kock has exploded onto the scene. That's the first one, so I've got a few more to come. What did you make of his performance on Sunday against Mumbai Indians playing for the Lions?
Well, of course, the man you are talking about, James, is the young South African wicketkeeper Quinton de Kock. He is just 19 years of age, and he is a batsman come wicketkeeper, and he scored 51 of 33 the other night for Lions against the Mumbai Indians as they chased down 158, which is really impressive knock. He played against Malinga with consummate ease, and the thing that struck me was his composure, and he has been really highly talked about in South Africa so far in his short career, but he does boast really impressive averages so far in all three forms of the game for the Lions. So I really am looking forward to seeing more of de Kock as the tournament goes on. He really does seem to have a lot of spunk about him. He's already played one of the seminal innings of the tournament.
Well, I quite agree. I mean, personally, I enjoy it when de Kock goes back deep in the crease, Nishan. A lot of de Kock's strokes were hugely enjoyable. I think de Kock works balls into unusual areas. Defence-wise, I'm not sure about de Kock blocking, but I'm quite looking forward to the next game. Maybe we'll see a situation where Ralph puts his finger up and de Kock's out immediately.
Well, I think we've all had enough of de Kock for one day. So, James, who else do you fancy to go far in the Champions League T20?
In terms of players, I wouldn't say I fancy him to do that well, but I was absolutely delighted to see Steve Smith back on a cricket pitch playing for Sydney against CSK. As regular listeners will know, we're big fans of the Smithster here, and it's been quite heartbreaking to see him sat at home during the World T20, where he actually seemed to spend quite a lot of time tweeting about a lawn bowls championship that he kept going down to see. So at the very least, about Steve Smith, you can't really say he's one of these players that goes off the rails when they have a bit of downtime. So anyway, it was nice to see him back, and his take on the boundary of Suresh Raina was absolutely tremendous. And Steve Smith, I would really have fancied him to catch Felix Baumgartner if the parachute hadn't opened. He really is that good at the moment. His outfielding in particular, he did actually perform with the bat as well. But anyway, Nishan, I doubt that I'm in a majority of people here sort of tipping Steve Smith to do well. So what about you, in terms of players and maybe teams even? Who are the ones we should be watching?
Well, I've been really impressed by two of the underdog teams so far in Lions and the Auckland Aces. The Auckland Aces actually had 2 weeks of acclimatisation prior to the start of the tournament, and they came through the qualification phase quite easily, and now they've also pulled off what Gavaskar termed as an upset of epic proportions after beating the Calcutta Knight Riders quite easily earlier on today. So I do quite fancy both Auckland Aces and the Lions to go far in this tournament, as it would be quite good to see the underdogs without too many flashy names and more built on the homegrown players without any really big names per se. They're only allowed 1 or 2 maximum as per the rules of their leagues, which kind of really skews it in favour of the IPL teams who are allowed 4 international players each. So you've got the Lions who have the likes of Sohail Tanvir and Dirk Nannes. I really fancy them to go well in these South African conditions. They are the types of bowlers who've been really inconsistent in T20 in recent times, but in South African conditions they really can prove to be a handful, and I think just getting off to a good start for the bowling side is really imperative, and it can be a huge advantage to reduce a team to say 30 for 2 after the first power play. So if Nannes and Sohail Tanvir fire, then the Lions could really be the underdog story of the tournament, especially if de Kock manages to remain firm in the middle order. So that's that for the Lions. But the Auckland Aces as well, you've got the likes of Azhar Mahmood has been incredible in the first 3 games so far. He's scored 135 runs in 3 innings with 2 match-winning not-outs as well. He's taken 9 wickets as well in 3 innings, and he's gone at just 6 and over. He's been the player of the tournament so far, which is quite an achievement considering Shane Watson is also in the mixer. And batting at number 3, he really does seem to have come of age, tender age of 47. I really think that both Auckland and Lions have a great chance of going far and causing some more upsets in the tournament.
Well, yes, I'm a big fan of Azhar Mahmood myself, and it really is lovely to see him rolling back the years. Although I suppose, technically speaking, that is normally the PCB's job.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Radio Cricket. I do thank you very much for joining us again today, and I leave you with the thought that with the rise of de Kock, we could have a scenario in the next 12 months where on the international stage we do have Cummins, Steyn and de Kock all on the same pitch. Quite a sobering thought to leave you with there tonight.
Yes, thank you, Nishant. I think we've squeezed quite enough in for one episode. I've been James Marsh. Goodbye.
I think it was a very poor performance. One of the worst things I have ever seen done on a cricket field. Good night.